Hey, and welcome back to Keys, Contracts, and Coffee. Today I'm going to talk to you about agency, the relationship you have with your real estate agent. We're going to focus on buyer's agency as well as seller or listing agency, but we're also going to touch on dual agency. There's a lot of back and forth on whether or not this is okay. I will put in my thoughts on this, as well as just touching on transaction brokerage. The first thing we're going to talk about is buyer's agency. This is one that up until about August of 2024 was never really a big deal because a lot of buyer's agents didn't have you sign a buyer's agency contract. They didn't have to legally. A lot of times you would go into a transaction of purchasing a property with an agent that was not the listing agent, and they would never have you sign a buyer's agency contract, even when you went under contract on that house to purchase it. Back before the law changed, back before August of 2024, I would take you through houses without having you sign a buyer's agency contract. We'd get to know each other, we'd build a relationship, and then once you found the house that you wanted to be in, that's when I legally represented you, because along with the offer for the house, I would have you fill out a buyer's agency contract. In the state of Missouri, you now have to have that buyer's agency contract the moment you go into a house, as long as you're not the listing agent. Yeah, if you're with the listing agent, sorry, if you're with the listing agent, you do not have to sign a buyer agency contract. You just have to remember you are viewing the house. Everything you say can and will be held against you if you choose to put an offer on that house, because that listing agent is not there to protect you or serve you. They are there to protect and serve the seller. So they can go back to the seller with everything you say, positive and negative, and use that against you in negotiations to ensure that the seller gets the most money for the offer. A good reason why you want to have a buyer's agent representing you. So there are certain things about the buyer's agency contract, I'm not going to go into depth or detail, that you need to understand. The two biggest things are the commissions and the amount of time that you're in that contract with that agent, which goes hand in hand with how do you get out of that contract if you don't like the agent. So the first thing is the commission. You as the buyer are responsible for paying the buyer agent commission if the seller does not pay it. I'm going to say, as of right now, it's January 2025. Every seller I have encountered has been willing to pay all, if not at least some portion of the buyer agent commission. That part is a negotiation thing, just like the negotiating of the price of the house. And this is something when you, if and when you come across someone who's not willing to pay the commission of your buyer agent, you can have the discussion with your agent and see what next steps to take. In the end, you're going to want that buyer's agent who is working in your corner when it comes to inspections and all the other stuff. You do not want the listing agent to be helping you with that. So that's the commissions and the payment part of the contract. The next part of the contract is how long you're in contract with that agent. So some agents will do a year, 6 months, 3 months, 30 days. Some will do it by the day. I do mine by the day because to me, it's a job interview every time. I want to continue working for you, and it's more similar with the way I did it before the law changed, because I never had a buyer's agency filled out beforehand. So this keeps me legal in the state of Missouri by having that contract when I go into a house, but it also doesn't keep you from having to or leaving if all of a sudden we don't get along. Because here's the deal. This is one of the biggest transactions of your life. You don't want someone representing you and being stuck with that someone if you guys don't get along, don't see eye to eye, if they make you uncomfortable, or vice versa. I don't want to be with someone that I don't get along with, makes me uncomfortable, sorry, or anything like that. That part is 100% negotiable. If you are not comfortable with an extended contract because you don't know the agent and they're forcing you to sign it before you go into the house, then tell them, until I get to know you, I want to do it by the day, because I want to know that I'm going to be comfortable with you, that I'm going to trust you when I do find a house and we have to go through the process together. So, and if they won't sign it by the day, by golly gee, find one who will. There are plenty of agents out there. Then after you've seen several houses, you've gotten comfortable with them, if you know them, like them, trust them, if you want to do an extended one so you're not having to amend every single time you go look at houses, then by golly, amend it. It's not that big a deal. The duration of the buyer agency contract, 100% negotiable. Don't sign a length of time that makes you uncomfortable. Like I said, if the agent is forcing it, go find another agent, one that will work with you. what goes along with that is how to get out of the buyer agency contract. So if you sign one that's an extended amount of time, and you don't care for the agent, or that you don't feel like they're working for you, you can tell that agent that you'd like out of the contract, that you don't feel comfortable with them. That it'd be like a termination of contract or a mutual release of sorts. There are ways to get out of the contract. Now, I will say, if they've been with you for a long time and have done a lot with you, the houses you've seen, if you do choose to go back and put an offer in on one with another agent, it is possible that they could fight for that and say, well, I was the one that showed them the house, I was with them for that long. So the waters get a little bit muddy. But your agent, the agent's broker, all of that, you can work through that and figure it out. But just know you can get out of it. You aren't stuck with that agent. Why is a buyer agent important? This is the biggest thing. Your buyer agent is going to work for you. Everything they do, they're doing on your behalf. Negotiations, getting things scheduled so that you don't have to worry about it, talking with title, talking with your lender, answering questions. There's a lot that goes on in the contract, and you want to make sure that someone who knows what they're doing, has done it before, and that they're in your corner fighting to make sure that you're getting the best deal and the best is happening to you. Not that things don't get a little bit scary sometimes or rough in a transaction, because sometimes transactions can be bumpy, but they're there to give you support, to guide you through it, to give you advice. If you don't have an agency relationship with a buyer's agent, you don't have that person to give you recommendations based on past experiences, knowledge of the market and the process, and you're pretty much on your own. So get a buyer's agent. They're very much worth the time to get to know. On the flip side is your seller's agent or listing agent. So the seller's agent or listing agent is exactly that. They market the property for the seller. Their job is to get the most money for that property as they can with the seller. Their job during inspections is to make sure that the seller has to do as little as possible to negotiate the easiest transaction for their seller. So that is their job 100%. They're holding open houses, they're marketing the property, they're paying for pictures and videos. Now, if you are a seller, this is very important. I have seen listings, and you've seen them too when you go on realtor.com or Zillow or any of those sites, when the you look at the pictures and you're like, well, this doesn't look like $1 million house, because the pictures are god awful. They're like tilted, or they're way zoomed in and you can't see the whole room. They're dark, things like that. As a seller, you can, if you see your house is marketed with those poor pictures, you have 100% every right to go to your listing agent and say, hey, these pictures are awful. I want better pictures. If you can't give me better pictures, I will find an agent who can market my property better with nicer pictures. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If you've got a house that is dilapidated and falling apart, do not expect this. No one's going to spend $400 to $600 on special photography and videos if it's something like that. But if you have a nice house, even if it's $100,000, $150,000 house, if those pictures don't look nice, if you cannot see the rooms, if they're all tilted or dark or blurry, you have 100%, even with a house that's like falling apart, you can get videos or pictures, with decent lighting, that are not blurry, that are not cockeyed. So have some expectation of what your marketing looks like. And if you have to fire your agent because they're not being receptive and marketing your place properly after you've spoken with them, then fire your agent. You can terminate the contract. You can withdraw it from the market with them. Just read the paperwork carefully, because in that withdrawal paperwork, there are like 2 or 3 different options of how you withdraw it. And if you pick the wrong option, you cannot market your property for a certain amount of time. If you pick the correct option, the new agent you choose, if you choose another agent, can start marketing it right away, put it online with good pictures. But 99% of the time, if your house had been shown, if within there will be a protection period in your listing contract. If someone went and saw your property, say the first week, and within that protection period, which is usually 90 days, but it varies. Some people put a year. I would never go for a year if I were you. But I think 90 days is kind of standard. The listing agent has the right to that particular buyer if that buyer came and looked at the house while they had it listed. So read everything carefully. Make sure the part that's marked is the one that you want to have marked. And if you don't understand it, ask the other agent you're planning on listing it with before you sign the document. But yes, you can withdraw your house. You can terminate the contract if it's not marketed properly. You have every right to tell the agent that, hey, I would like to hold more open houses. I would like video, blah, 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 blah. It's your house. You're paying them. They work for you. Beyond marketing, again, the listing agent is there to negotiate on your behalf to get you the most money, the easiest transaction where you do as little as possible for the buyer as they possibly can. So that is what a listing agent is there for. They're the one in your corner, which is the opposite of a buyer's agent, who's in the buyer's agent corner, or the buyer's corner, excuse me. So in the state of Missouri, there's also something called dual agency. This is actually legal in a few states. Dual agency is where the same person represents both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. So let's say I've got your house listed and I also bring a buyer to you, and then I represent you both. I have to tell you, hey, I also represent this buyer. You and the buyer have to agree to allow me to be a dual agent. Sometimes the agent will lower their commission slightly. Other times they will keep it whatever the percentage was they originally had. So it could be the same commission you were paying if it was a different buyer's agent and then your listing agent. All of that is written up generally in the listing contract, so read it over carefully. By the way, with listing agent, you also get to decide how your commissions are, what the price of the commissions are, and how they're structured. Like if a buyer brings a buyer agent brings a buyer, that sort of thing. So talk to your agent about the different options. Back to dual agency. Some agents will lower their commission if you allow them to bring the buyer. They don't lower it by half. They still get a little bit extra for helping out that buyer. But and other ones will keep it the same. So you may be paying the same price. It depends. All that will be in your listing contract on how that's taken care of. So dual agency, there's a lot of conversations about dual agency. My family has had, before we got into real estate, had some very negative circumstances and dealings with dual agency. So we do tend to try to stay away from dual agency as much as possible. There are circumstances where I can say that it's okay, like in a land deal, you're not dealing with inspections. Land is a little different than houses, where it's what someone's willing to pay and what someone's willing to sell it for. So in that instance, dual agency isn't necessarily an issue. With dual agency, both buyer and seller have to agree to having the same agent represent both. Another time when dual agency isn't necessarily a problem would be like in a highest and best situation where there's multiple offers, because in that instance, no agent can recommend how much you should spend on a house, because in the end, you're the one that's paying the payments. You know what you're pre-approved for. You know what you're comfortable doing. So in a highest and best situation, you're basically offering what you're comfortable losing the house for. And that's not something that a buyer's agent has to talk to you about. So that in that situation, it's not as big a deal. Of course, you get to inspections, it can be a little iffy. Your buyer agent, if you're on the buying side, no longer can give you maybe the same recommendations they would have given you if they weren't also representing the seller. Same with that agent representing the seller on how they respond to the buyer's inspection notice. They can't necessarily say, hey, this is what I would recommend you do, because that would be messing with the agency they had with the buyer as well. So you lose a lot of your relationship and your ability to recommend things to both the buyer and the seller with dual agency. In 2025, 15% of transactions actually fell through. Of that 15%, 80% of those fell through at inspection. So as I kind of stated earlier, you definitely complicate the process when it's a dual agency situation, because that agent is no longer there to truly be able to help and make recommendations on your behalf, because they represent the other side as well. A lot of people think having, like a buyers, for instance, think that having the listing agent as their agent makes things less complicated, that the seller is getting more money because they're maybe getting paid less commission. Well, you as the buyer and then of course the seller, you are getting less of an agent in that situation and basically walking through it almost on your own without any support in that case. You're not necessarily helping yourself and you're not necessarily helping the seller. And again, the process becomes more complicated. do yourself a favor, get a buyer's agent. If you're the seller, do yourself a favor and tell them you don't want dual agency, that you want to be completely 100% represented by your seller, and that if someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to buy this house, that have them refer it off so that they are just yours and they just represent you. There's nothing wrong with expecting the best agent for the amount of money that you are paying your agent to represent you. Keep it simple, do away with dual agency. And there will be a lot of Missouri realtors and other realtors in other states that will 100% disagree with me, and that's okay. They're allowed to. They've had different circumstances. Like I said, we had some personally that was really, really, really bad before we ever got into real estate. And so we decided once we got into real estate, that was something that we were going to do our best to stay away from. Everyone has their own preference, and that is simply ours. And for the agents that do the dual agency, I'll say there are a lot of great agents out there that do the dual agency. It doesn't bother them, and they're still great agents, and I love every one of them. It's just not something we do, nor is it something we recommend. So that's all I'll say about dual agency. The other agency is the last one, is transaction brokerage. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Transaction brokerage is pretty simple. They fill out the paperwork. They don't give you any recommendations. You ask questions. They don't give you the answers. They're just filling out your paperwork. The funny thing about transaction brokerage, whether it's the buyer or seller side, a lot of brokerages or agents, or however you want to do it, they charge the same fee as having them as an agent. So you might as well have them be there to give you recommendations, to support you in the process, rather than just filling out your paperwork. Now, there are probably some who will give a lesser fee, just like a flat fee. And if it's a reasonable fee and you're okay with that, I mean, like I said, it's just paperwork. So if that's the route you want to go, then that's the route you want to go. But again, they're not there to support you. They're not there to answer your questions or make recommendations. They are just there to fill out the paperwork. You're doing all of it on your own other than the paperwork. That's all I have to say about transaction brokerage. So there are other types of agency, like, if you're leasing, things like that. But this is just like for the purchasing. So your transaction brokerage, listing or selling, you're buying, and then the dual agency. If you have any questions, get a hold of me. You may disagree about some of the stuff. And if there's something you're curious about, always feel free to ask me. I'm always open for discussion and educating people to help them make the best decision possible for them and their situations. Mm-hmm. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed Keys, Contracts, and Coffee. I hope that you got a lot of information out of this. If there are things I didn't touch on that you're curious about, leave me a comment, shoot me a text, send me an email. My number is 573-480-8428. I'm always happy to answer your questions and help you get educated in what's going on in the real estate market, even when it just comes to simple things like buyer's agency and seller's agency. So have a fantastic day. We'll see you next time. Bye.